Today in Rome, several people are being canonized, that is, officially recognized as saints. The most famous of these is the beloved Archbishop of San Salvador, the martyred Oscar Romero. For his countrymen and for people throughout the world, he has long been recognized as a saint. But today it is being made both official and universal by a solemn proclamation of the Holy Father. Up until 1977, Romero was a rather unremarkable priest and bishop, even leaning towards the institutional side and saying little against the horrendous abuses perpetrated by the military and the death squads in his country. When in 1977 he was appointed Archbishop of San Salvador, the right-wing military was delighted because his predecessor, the old archbishop, had been a constant thorn in their side, speaking out always against the abuses and developing programs for the poor. Now, they thought, here at last was someone weak who would be in the pocket of the rich and powerful. On the other hand, there was general disappointment among those many priests and sisters dedicated to improving the lot of the suffering people. Both groups were mistaken in their predictions about this new man. But one priest, Father Rutilio Grande, reached out to the new archbishop and urged him to learn from the poor and speak on their behalf. Within days, Father Rutilio himself was murdered by the government. His death deeply moved the archbishop, who said, "When I looked at Rutilio lying there dead, I thought, if they have killed him for doing what he did, then I too have to walk the same path." That night, he was transformed into the one of the world's great champions for the poor and oppressed. From that moment on, inspired by the death of his friend, he stood with the poor and denounced every act of violence and injustice, and became the voice of the voiceless, the embodiment of what the church should be. He immediately canceled all masses in the country for the following Sunday, except one big special mass in the cathedral. Over 100,000 people attended that mass and heard their new archbishop's bold call for social justice, disarmament, and peace, an end to poverty, and an end to the torture and killing of the people. This sparked a government rampage of murder against priests, catechists, and church workers, and government death squads massacred village after village. Fired with a new spirit, Archbishop Romero was not to be silenced. His courage instilled hope in the oppressed. Week after week, his Sunday homilies were broadcast nationwide on live radio, and everyone in the country stopped what they were doing to listen to their archbishop. His homilies became the main source of information about what was happening in the country. He listed the disappearances, tortures, and murders that had come to light during the week, and he published these lists in the diocesan newspaper for all to read. In 1978, he opened the doors of the seminary to shelter all displaced victims of violence, and huge crowds flocked there. He stopped the construction of the new cathedral, declaring that when the war is over, the hungry fed, the children educated, then we can resume building our cathedral. The saintly archbishop would go to the city garbage dumps to search for the discarded, tortured victims of the death squads. Each day he received countless people, listening to their stories of tragedy, comforting them, and doing something about it. Half of the other bishops in the country were against him. They were in the pockets of the oppressors. and they accused him of treason and swore to destroy him as they continued blessing the tanks and weapons and hobnobbing with the wealthy and powerful generals with so much blood on their hands. As always in history, it was the people who had the gift of recognizing a saint when they saw him. And their saintly archbishop was their only voice, their only hope against the horrendous oppression taking place. The massacres of the poor were escalated. Nearly all the priests closest to the archbishop had already been tortured and killed. He himself received daily death threats, but this was no time to be bullied into silence. This was no time to fear for his own life. He was ready to give that up at any time for his people. "I have often been threatened with death," he said. "If they kill me, I shall arise in the people. If the threats are fulfilled, I offer my blood to God for the redemption and resurrection of my suffering people. Let my blood be a seed of freedom and the sign that hope will soon become reality." In his final Sunday sermon, Archbishop Romero delivered an impassioned plea. "I appeal to the men of the army and the police. Brothers, you are part of our own people. You are killing your own campesino brothers and sisters. And before a human order to kill, listen to the law of God that says, 'Thou shalt not kill.' No soldier is obliged to obey an order against the law of God. It is time to recover your consciences and obey them rather than the orders of sin. In the name of God, and in the name of this suffering people whose cries storm heaven more each day, I beg you, I ask you, I order you, in the name of God, stop the repression." The next day, March 24th, 1980, the Archbishop was saying Mass in a small hospital chapel. He read the Gospel of the day. "Unless the grain of wheat falls to the earth and dies, it remains only a grain, but if it dies, it bears much fruit." A shot rang out, and Archbishop Romero fell behind the altar, his splattered blood dripping from the crucifix behind. A country accustomed to grieving now grieved loudly over their slain shepherd. But that night in the wealthiest neighborhoods, fireworks and gunshots celebrated the silencing of this inconvenient voice of God. His funeral was the largest demonstration in the history of the country, quite possibly in the history of Latin America. The government was so afraid of the masses of mourners that they threw bombs into the crowd and opened fire, killing some 30 people and injuring hundreds more. The funeral mass was never finished, and the body was quickly buried. Though immediately revered as a saint and a martyr by the people, the official process and recognition was blocked by hands stained with the blood of the martyred archbishop. In fact, 3 Salvadoran ambassadors to the Vatican had actively lobbied against making him a saint. Even in death, and perhaps especially in death, they feared him. The Holy Father, though, refused to bow to dirty political pressures and insisted that Monsignor Romero be duly honored, declaring, "The process was blocked, but now we unblock it." And today we have a new saint. His blood, spilled, commingled with the blood dripping from the crucified body of Christ throughout the ages and throughout the world, closed forever the mouth of the dying man, but open forever the eyes of a yet living world. If they kill me, he had said, I shall arise in the people. Let it be so. Let the undaunted spirit of Oscar Romero, the suffering spirit of the poor and oppressed, the all-powerful spirit of the living God arise in us. Let there arise through us a new world where no more blood need ever be shed, no more bombs ever fall, no more cries of hunger ever be heard. Let it be so. Let it finally and truly be so.